So the first session is around the role of the telco in the digital economy. So Chris, what do you think is behind all of this before we get our expert speakers up?
Well, I think as an industry, certainly since you and I have been involved with it, and when that youngster Parsons came in 25 years ago, and when he got involved in it, it was always a very self-contained industry. We spoke our own language, we had our own technology, we designed and defined things within the laboratories, whether it was Martelsham or Rennes or Darmstadt or Bell Labs. So we defined what was going to, and eventually we exposed the service to the customers. And in the role in the digital economy, it's sort of been flipped on its head, and we're now having to react to what's going on outside and what our communication services are being used for. So that was the idea about the debate is, what role do the telecoms players play as we move into this digital economy? Of course, we know connectivity has never been so important, and yet, many of us are paying less and less for the services. So many trends within consumer and business markets. And if you want to sum it, my summation of it is that we used to have an inside-out model where we defined things and eventually exposed it. It's now becoming an outside-in model where whatever we're doing, whether it's us as consumers, households, businesses, society, that is starting to shape what we need to do. And I think that you're right, that combination of 5G, edge, cloud, all comes together. And hopefully by the end of the day, we'll have changed some people's thinking about it and debated a little bit.
Perfect. And so we're going to hear from the first of our expert witnesses now. I should say that our expert witnesses will be talking for just 5 minutes. We do have a bell here.
Oh, yes, sorry.
To bring things to a conclusion. If that doesn't work, we have a 5-foot whale tusk and a fire extinguisher, which we have recently seen brings even the most dedicated performance to a close. So,
and Varley as well.
And Varley as well, he can get very vicious. So without further ado, we're very happy to welcome Michael Sherman, who's the Chief Strategy Officer for BT. Michael, come and give us your 5 minutes of wisdom.
Thank you. So thank you for having me. First, I thought I'd do a quick intro to me, and I'm going to keep it fast because I have 5 minutes. But just my background, I actually was a software founder. So I started a software company. I eventually took it public on NASDAQ before selling that company. Then I did about 12 years as a management consulting at BCG, where I was a lead partner. We actually ran our telecom practice in North America. And then I joined BT, so I'm now part of a telecom. And the reason I put that in perspective is when I reflect to the digital economy and look back as to what's happened over the past 20, 30 plus years, foundationally, what's been enabled today has been through a lot of innovation, development, civil engineering, new equipment engineering, new ways of working in telcos. And so what goes unrecognized is the fact that connectivity, when we start thinking around the globe, but also developed markets, there's been a significant amount of investment in the infrastructure that's needed to enable a lot of what we call the digital economy, so the new types of applications and services that have come to market. So we can think of the Netflix of the world, the Ubers, the Googles of the world. These all rely on really stable, brilliant connectivity that works everywhere. And that's something that when we're in most of the developed world, we experience. We get off of a plane, we turn on our cell phone, it just works as long as you have the right cell phone plan and you're willing to pay for the roaming charges. But those things are provided because we've created the standards, we've collaborated as an industry. There's been friction at times, but by and large, what we've done is we've enabled the network of services to be developed and worked. So what's happened over the last 15 years? When we reflect on the last 15 years of BT, and this is just not BT, this is the industry, we've seen the emergence of some really great technologies and players in the marketplace, and these are services that all of us consume that use this underlying digital infrastructure, but don't necessarily have to fund it. So they don't have to pay for it, but they get an immense amount of benefit from it. And these businesses ultimately develop and flourish. In the telecoms, what have we had? We've given away massive amounts of value to our customers over time because if you actually trace things like pound per megabit transmitted, that's come down consistently year over year for over 20 years. We always transmit more data at a lower price point. And that's a great thing. Consumers get a benefit, businesses get a benefit. Also, these new digital economy applications get a benefit. The challenge has been that there has been a new set of economics that have come up in the marketplace, and that is the economics of people using their data to actually get services that they otherwise would have had to pay for. And that can be simple things like just think about email. If you went back 20, 30 years ago, you paid for potentially an AOL email account, a Prodigy email account. You may have even paid BT for your email account, but you paid for email. You don't pay for email. Well, most of us, hopefully, in this room don't pay for it. We get it for free. We get a Google email, a Yahoo email for free. Well, it's not free. The reality is that service is only there and can only be funded through reading your data, using your data, figuring out ways to market and sell things to you. So why is that a problem? In of itself, it's not a problem, except that the economics are imbalanced. So these services that look like they're relatively free consume massive amounts of data, and there has been this expectation, especially on the consumer side, that data transmitted in a plan is free. So I need to pay for the connection, but then once I have consumption on that connection, consumption is free. Almost any other marketplace, if I have an automobile and I go to drive my automobile, I pay more for fuel. And also, if I'm buying fuel, if I'm buying petrol, the amount that I paid for petrol 10 years ago, it's much more expensive today. In our industry, when you think about what we create, we're putting new masts up, new radios up, new fiber in the ground. And if you look at these technologies, they're actually more expensive. When you look at the kit that we get from some of the vendors that are in this room, when you start to think about the core networking equipment, when you think about the radios, these things are getting more expensive. The costs are going up. Yet we're expected to transmit and sell these services cheaper. So for us in the digital economy, we think the telco is foundational. We think the next decade when we look forward is a pivotal one, and we believe that we have to reset and rebalance how the economics of this industry works. So we have to be in a much more pragmatic way of selling connectivity and connectivity services to our customers. That way they get the full benefit of the next generation of integrated converged technologies that come from full fiber and 5G. If we don't reset that, we're going to see the pace at which the communications, the foundation of communications develop, it will have to slow because the economics of the industry are not such that it can continue to bear this amount of level of investment without new sets of pricing and returns coming to the market. So that's my quick intro.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Mike. I think since you've been in the UK, you've become Mike rather than Michael. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Cool. Nice to have you. You did say automobile, though. Anyway, we'll pick up that. So to the stage, could I please ask Mr. Nik Willetts, the head of the TM Forum, to give a perspective from an industry organisation that I've been working with for many, many years. Nik, the stage is yours. Your 5 minutes starts now.
Well, thank you, Chris. I'm not sure my internal clock is as good as Mike's, so I'm going to just keep an eye on my phone here to keep within the 5 minutes. So this question is the question that certainly keeps me and my team up at night in an industry body that's here to try and answer that question and help the industry to transform, to be successful over what I believe has the opportunity to be a decade of growth. The challenge is we're a little bit like a toddler looking at this Christmas tree with all these lovely Christmas presents under it saying, there's so many presents, there's so many opportunities, there's so many I don't like to open, but we're not quite sure how to capture some of those opportunities. I think we can divide the opportunity ahead and answer this question of what is the role of the telco in the digital economy into 3 layers. And we can think of those layers a little bit like climbing a mountain. And we're pretty convinced that at the top of that mountain, there's a fantastic view. That being at the top of that mountain, being whether you want to call it a platform player, being an internet hyperscaler is a great place to be. And we're hugely admiring of a lot of the value, as Mike described, that we've given away over the last decade. We'd like to capture some of that. But we can't forget the basics on the journey to get there. And a lot of the discussion, I'm sure, will happen today. A lot of the discussion in this great agenda will focus on where we could be, but may not focus enough on the foundations we have to get right. Because our core product, the thing is that still making this a $2 trillion industry that is still remarkably profitable, is connectivity. And if we don't understand the changes that are happening in our customers and what they expect from connectivity, we risk being stuck in the middle of the road, not actually addressing the changes and needs of our customers today, while we go on a journey to try and capture new value. So when we talk about that role of connectivity, it is no longer a standalone product. It is no longer that we can just sell blindly connectivity to customers and let them do whatever they want with it. We need to understand how that connectivity is being used. It is part of a fabric of digital infrastructure combined with edge compute, combined with AI capabilities, combined with cloud compute, many other aspects of digital infrastructure that have to be weaved together if we are to deliver on the potential of connected cars, flying cars, whatever it is you think we are going to enable over the next decade. And yet today, connectivity is too hard to procure, too hard to order. Why is it that I can, in this room, come up with an idea for a startup business and go onto Amazon on AWS, and within minutes have the cloud infrastructure I need to run that business and to create my startup, and yet connectivity from a connectivity provider may take me months or even years in some cases to get where I want it across the infrastructure I need. So the connectivity as a service, network as a service, we bounce these terms around, but we almost take it as read. But the transformation in how we package and sell and integrate connectivity is the first foundation on that journey. With that right, we can move into more elaborate services. We can look at how we become a multi-service integrator, as we've started to see some operators doing. If you haven't seen the kind of deals that the likes of Orange Business Services are doing with Mars and companies like Sony, or BT Global Services are doing with companies around the world, we have to understand that unless we have those foundations right, we can't move into that broader role to provide not only connectivity, but a range of additional IT services. And when we talk about the needs of our enterprise customers, of B2B customers, their needs are evolving too. They, like many of us, are sitting on years of technology legacy. They want simplicity. They want solutions. They don't want a company turning up and offering SIM cards and pure connectivity. So to get to that second level, we also have to understand more about our customers, and that's where a lot of these verticalized use cases that get so much attention around 5G are more than just understanding the connectivity needs. They're about understanding how we can provide and collaborate with, in some cases, companies we might see as our competitors, to overcome those challenges and to provide global capabilities. And that's where the industry needs to overcome one of its largest Achilles heels, which is the fact that we are geographically fragmented. We need to be able to provide those integration capabilities globally, and that means working much more closely, as we have done in the past, with companies we see as competitors to work together to actually seize those opportunities. Finally, some of us, and I'm not convinced it will be that many operators, can go, if you like, all the way to the top of the mountain. We can say we can actually provide deep services, solutions into specific industry verticals. But in a lot of the conversations I'm in with companies around the world, this is talked about as if it's easy. Well, we're going to go into automotive, manufacturing, healthcare, the list goes on and on. That is deeply, deeply difficult. You have to have expertise in many different sectors, the resources to go and invest in understanding those sectors to deliver the depth of service that's required. So whilst I believe that some will, you have to really pick and place your bets very carefully to achieve that. So I see a vibrant role for the telco over the next decade. I think the challenge is making sure we get the foundations right to get there, and the realizing that in order to compete, we need to collaborate. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Nick. And I see you knew exactly what I was going to ask you to do next, and you've done it, so you get a gold star. Right, next up, a view from one of the biggest and most traditional vendors in the market. We're very happy to welcome Preeti Nagarajan, who's the head of strategy business for business area networks at Ericsson. So Preeti, come on, please take the stage.
I just had to bring a bigger device. Total cost of ownership, we're totally onto it. $2 trillion market with a growth rate of about 3%. I come from a country which went mobile first, India. I live in a city which claims that mobile telecommunication was born there, Stockholm. So just putting all of that together in the global atmosphere, I trade hours of digital usage with my children every day. I didn't have mobile connectivity until I turned 20, and from then on, I haven't looked back. That's my personal usage. So I just wanted to give you some data points. There were 27,000 subscribers in the year 2001. Do you know how many there would be at the end of this year? Any guesses? About 7.9 billion subscriptions, which include mobile broadband and IoT. I'm not going to try to devise how the industry has grown, but it has. Most of us have 2 screens, 3 screens, maybe 4. How many of you watch TV in the regular telly versus something else? I think our consuming habits have changed as well, which completely opens up an opportunity for innovation. Apps, softwares, devices, whatever. Now, if you look at what does this technology really do, we're looking at latencies in the order of 10 milliseconds, round trip time from using a user equipment all the way to an application server and back. We're looking at making sure spectrum, which is as rare as oil right now in prices, is totally used in the right way. Spectral efficiency, absolutely important. We're making sure that mobility is seamless. Wherever you go, if you're transferring on a Wi-Fi-based WhatsApp call, you can do that from WhatsApp to 4G or 5G just seamlessly. All this is so important. We can't live without it. So now just look at that in the future. Our kids are going to do real-time gaming, AR, VR. There's going to be healthcare that's mobile, agriculture, manufacturing, retail, logistics, everything digitized. What we've created together is a huge platform for innovation. I can just summarize last morning. The only time when I checked if I really had a wallet was when I was drawing out English pounds. I did everything with my mobile. So I'd be in trouble if I didn't have my mobile with me. I wouldn't be in trouble if I didn't have my real wallet with me. But a little while ago, Ericsson wrote a paper along with Imperial College London. And the paper was designed to study how important is mobile broadband for global economic development. What did they find out? The paper concluded 10% increase in mobile broadband subscriptions caused a 0.8% increase in GDP. That's a very important number. Now, to that number, we should add something more. I keep trading with my kids the number of hours they can use their devices, right? And we know the amount of innovation and the fact that we're inseparable, right? Now, mobile subscriptions have consumer value, and that's growing. So I think it's time to write a new paper on sustained economies. Once the network is there, the value that it generates continues to grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Preeti. And to complete our opening quartet, I'd like to welcome to the stage Simon Saunders from Google to give a slightly different perspective on the market. Simon, it's all yours.
Good morning, everybody. So my day job is very much working in partnership with telcos, between Google and telcos really all over the world. But outside of that day job, I'm a visiting professor at King's College London, just down the road. And 3 months ago now, I organised the world's first 5G music lesson. And that was a great lesson for me, both in terms of some of the challenges of making that kind of technology work in practice, but on the other hand, of the opportunities of the kind of low latency that Preeti was talking about just now, and how that creates those sort of hair-raising, spine-tingling moments when people are actually properly connected in a way that creates presence and an opportunity for the internet of skills, which is way beyond today's experience of a conventional video call. So I see telco's role in the digital economy in sort of 2 directions. One as key organizations that need to be digitized, and I'm working with many telcos who want to digitize or be part of digitalization, however we parse that, because they have the opportunity to create more efficient operations, as Mike was indicating the need for, and because it is a need. It is something that you know, there are challenges that kind of digitalization really helps address. On the other hand, they are a key, perhaps the key opportunity for the rest of the economy to achieve those benefits by being always connected to their data, to their information, and that way to access cloud services and access the data that they want to. As far as Google's concerned, our mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful, and I'm pleased to say I've remembered that after 4 years working at Google. The first bit about organizing the world's information is kind of obvious when you think about the services that Google provides. The second bit about making it accessible is really the area I work in making sure connectivity is adequate for that. And it's an odd interaction in that Google doesn't deliver that connectivity, certainly as far as the access part is concerned, and we really rely on great partnerships with telcos to make that connectivity universal, make it accessible, make it affordable, and make it deliver the opportunities for new experience. It's a long time since it was just about voice and texts. In doing that, the sort of opportunities and needs for partnerships between us come ever closer. So I'm working closely with telcos on issues, for example, of network virtualization, where getting the efficiencies, again, that Mike was indicating were necessary, we have the opportunity for doing that from the sorts of networks based on software that Google's always built. And in the past, we did that only for our own operations. Increasingly, what we're doing is making that capability available to telcos all over the place. We can virtualize network functions. We can deliver AI-based systems to help to plan networks and optimize and squeeze the best out of those networks and the scarce spectrum that's necessary to power them. We can give them great insights into how their customers are really interacting with the network in terms of the quality of the experience they're getting, so that they can spend their sort of scarce resources on just the right places that are really impactful for customers. We can also help them with kind of rolling out that network as we move into a world of 5G, and I used to chair the Small Cell Forum, and every year, next year is going to be the big year of small cells, and that's still true today as it was 15 years ago. But with 5G and millimeter wave opportunities for 5G, they're definitely going to have to densify their networks, and figuring out exactly which is the golden lamppost to put those cells on, is part of what we can help to do. We're doing that actively in all sorts of ways. One is working, with my colleagues in Google Cloud to form really strong partnerships with telcos, so we can externalize those capabilities. A couple of weeks ago, Vodafone announced a global initiative to use Google Cloud for analytics and for big data, and to use Google machine learning, indeed, to plan and optimize their networks. Also, at about the same time, Telecom Italia announced that they're bringing those cloud and edge capabilities to businesses across Italy. So they're both using it for their own operations and helping to make that available together with connectivity to those enterprises and really get something from that. And we don't do this as a sort of passive participant and hope for the best with the networks. We build out a lot of physical infrastructure to make that work better. And a great example for a number of years that telcos will be well aware of is we deploy so-called Google Global Caches physically into telco networks, and they contain the most commonly pulled content of users on those particular networks, and make sure that the telcos don't have to pull every cat video across the internet, so they save money on the interconnect. And simultaneously, their customers and our customers get a better experience of those cat videos because they're available closer to the edge. We've got a lot of telcos coming to us and saying we want you to go even closer to the edge with that kind of caching, and where it makes sense to do so and where the services emerge, we will absolutely do that. And we have an efficient way of delivering that already today. What we're also doing with 5G is basically getting deluged by telcos asking us to find out what the killer use case for 5G is. Now, we don't know any better than anybody else, but what we can do is try and help to solve that sort of chicken and egg problem of developers not really being very keen to build apps for a small user base today for 5G, but needing those apps to flow and that value to come in order that the build out of 5G becomes sensible. So we're doing things like creating APIs in Android that allow developers' apps to find out when the device is on 5G and find out everything they need to really deliver a great experience in the right way. We're also providing APIs, for example, to allow telcos to upsell their customers on better connectivity services and have those kind of messages, do you want to buy more data? Do you want the fastest 5G data tacked onto your bill and exposed directly in the Android operating system, which delivers that very well. So I don't think we're in a position where, telcos are, not participants in digitization. I think they are the key participants in terms of enabling that. And I think there's many opportunities for more partnerships to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Was that close to the bell, Graham?
We were close to the bell. Well, I almost rang the bell on you, but I didn't. So there we are.
So Simon, how many Google mentions do you have to get in a 5-minute presentation?
I don't think there's a quota, but I obviously get bonus food at work if I get it right.
I'm sure we can find out for you and get that information for you. Well, so as you see, in terms of the format, that we have, this is our expert witnesses giving you background to the discussion. Graham will now introduce the motion.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, the motion is that the combination of 5G and fibre provides a platform for telcos to create greater value. And I'm arguing for this motion randomly, and Chris is randomly arguing against it.
And if you see him reading from notes, please stop him, all right? Because that's
So I'm going to go first because I'm arguing for the motion. So I am going to urge you, ladies and gentlemen, when the vote comes, show us the green part of your voting card like this. Vote for the motion. The reason I think you should be voting for the motion is, actually, let's not get too hung up on exactly what's going to create greater value. Right? It may not be 5G and it may not be fibre. I think what we've heard from our participants today is that actually greater value is going to come from digitisation of telco operations, right? Either through the likes of Ericsson, through external providers and partners such as Google. We're going to transform the way that telcos work. We're going to simplify products. We're going to virtualize the core. And we're going to have a much greater and more productive experience with our customers, whether they're business customers or consumer customers. So going back to Mike's point, we may not have been the best performing sector, even though we've underpinned fantastic economic growth through internet services over the past 20 years or so. Telecoms may not have been the best performing sector, but that, ladies and gentlemen, is about to change. And I urge you to support the motion. Here we are. There's what you should be holding up the green card. Chris.
Can I just check our liability here? If people invest on the back of what you just said. So, ladies and gentlemen, obviously I'm colourblind as well as generally blind, so I won't see which way you vote, so don't worry about that. But in terms of the motion, the issue behind this is very much around the need for the telecom industry to change its approach, its attitude, its positioning. And I think the value, as we've seen, Mike mentioned we've lost value. Preeti talked about how many of these additional devices and elements are all communicating, and it underpins everything. But I think in order to be a good digital citizen in this emerging economy, telcos have actually got to sort out get their houses in order. They need to make sure that if we are in an area where fibre is available, that yes, we can get connected. If the mobile is there, if that's the best option, that we get connected. That we're not confused and bamboozled by the different technologies. As an industry, we've hidden behind technology and waves of technology and the complexity of technology. It's the industry job to deliver that complexity. But if you go and talk to any branding people about the brand value of what connectivity brings to the industry, we've got to simplify that. We've got to make sure that it does deliver the connectivity. Now, and because we have in the motion the combination of fibre, and I guess I left copper off there, but we need copper in there as well until we have all the fibre in place. But that combination of these different industries, we're so siloed and fragmented in our views that actually bringing those together. So in the future, we won't even talk about mobile broadband or fixed broadband, but just broadband. And the fact is that the adding value against the basic connectivity is generally not going to happen for the reasons mentioned by Simon and by Nik about the inclusion, the arrival of all of these other platforms. When I was talking to Mansour, who, by the way, is having a lovely time in his house in Spain at the moment, on his gardening leave. When I was talking to Mansour about this, his big issue and his vision as a CTO for Ofcom was to look at the way in which other platforms might come in and start to add value. And I think to Nick's point about moving our way up the mountain, that actually the platforms, and if you're familiar with Rakuten and what Rakuten has been doing in Japan and what they're starting to bring more broadly across the globe, is that they are using the brand power, the power of commercial activity of e-commerce to actually bring more value, a membership value. And I think what we need to think about in the telecom industry is not so much about can we take a bigger slice of the pie, but how can we best deliver that slice of the pie, and not can we add cream to it or jam to it or Nutella or whatever you prefer on top of your pie, but actually let's get the industry sorted out. Let's get over some of the spectrum issues. Let's get over the building out the fibre issues. Let's build for the benefit of the country, whichever it is, and every country is different. Let's acknowledge that for starters. So actually, there's a regulatory piece to this. There's a governmental piece. There are broader stakeholders in this. I would say to you that in the way that the telecom industry has been run in the past, that it's been almost of self-interest since we privatised and deregulated the market. So I would encourage you to vote against the motion, because I think the value will be created by other people, other innovators, other participants in the digital economy, who we, as users, whether individuals, businesses or society, want to work with more closely. Mr. Wilde.
Thank you very much. Right, now we move on. Now you have to take part. Okay,
Actually, first of all, would any of the experts like to come back?
Oh, sorry, yes, go, right.
I guess I'll just start by saying I'm clearly over in this camp. I think BT is clearly over in this camp. But I'll start with just reflecting. I think it would be a dystopic world if we ended up on the left-hand side of this. And it would be because the mass just won't play out in the favor of what you're saying. At some point, we're in an industry of unprecedented amounts of investment. And one of the lenses we look at BT is just take how much of your depreciation and amortization are you covering? And so you can invest below DNA, which means I have assets that I can sweat a little bit longer, or you invest above. Historically, the industry's been at about 105% of DNA. We're probably operating at about 120, and that's projected to go up to 130. The only way that makes sense for any telco is we have to get increased returns. That's a must. The second thing is, quite honestly, globally, and I don't mean this pejoratively to anyone, and so I don't want Google to take this negatively, but most nations don't want to send this massive tax over to Silicon Valley. The world has woken up to what's been happening, and it's been a massive wealth transfer to the United States, and in particular, one sector of the United States has created a disproportionate amount of wealth in very few people's hands, and you have a massive amount of people suffering around the globe because of this wealth shift. That is affecting nations where we are struggling to invest in infrastructure. And so at the end of the day, whether we as an industry take care of it, the DOJ, the United States government will start to take care of it, and quite honestly, the EU will start to take care of it. But we don't really have to do anything on this, because the populist movement that we're seeing around the globe, these things are all interrelated. And I would say if we don't get economics back into place to infrastructure, water, railroads, transit, and telecoms, who are doing the investment to get the services that consumers want, we're in a dystopic world. So I just argue that we cannot end up on the left-hand side, or else we're going to find that this right-hand side just won't deliver what we expect for consumers and businesses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perhaps I can pick up on that. So I mean, I agree that we need to be on this side of the stage here. And funnily enough, I thought Chris wasn't arguing against the motion, actually. He appeared to be giving a prescription for all the practical ways in which we can make sure we end up on this side. I think it's manifestly the case that telcos are delivering enormous value, and that value has increased as you deliver greater connectivity services and make the experience of that connectivity closer and closer to something that just connects people and connects information, so the value goes up. Now, there is a discussion about where that value flows, but I mean, to take on the sort of vocabulary of a regulator, the sort of value that's generated for consumers is absolutely immense in this, in being able to conduct their work and their business and their social lives over these networks and using these services. Figuring out how that all fits together is the challenge going forwards, but I think we have the kinds of technologies that are necessary. And notably, going back to the subject of the motion, 5G and fibre deployed intelligently in the right places and in the right styles are the sort of key ingredients for a very sustainable telco industry working with a wide range of partners in the next decade.
So you just rewrote my motion, thank you.
Maybe we're sitting in the middle, but I don't know which way you're going to turn. I'm turning on the green side.
Oh, look,
the
it's
other
looking
side
good
as well.
for me at the moment,
But you
I
know,
have to say.
just to add on to what Mike said before and what Simon said before, you can't do it without either side. I mean, you know, as a network infrastructure, it's extremely clear we're working with the opcos in the world. But what we need to know is without the first smartphones that came in 2007, data wouldn't have picked up in 3G. So we need the right interplay with the partners in the industry that bring the devices or other services. YouTube, cat videos could be one of it. It could be Fortnite. It could be anything. It could even be a banking application. So we need to kind of stitch the whole story together. Otherwise, it's extremely hard now to make the cost at the right level.
Well, we are sitting in the middle, and
Yeah.
Chris, I'm very sorry, but I'm going to lean to Graham's side.
No
of the
apology
stage.
needed.
I think Mike makes a really important point here. We see a window opening up with what's happening in geopolitics right now that's actually good for telco. When it comes to this sort of question of do we need connectivity, I think the panel's answered that very well. It's just taken as read. In a decade's time, everything's connected one way or the other. Whether it's the companies we see today running those networks, whether they're owned and the infrastructure is still part of the same entity, all open questions, all to play for, largely will be guided by economics. But the change, I think, is being underplayed right now is this political move and the concerning moves about where that cash flow is going. And I think that creates a window of opportunity where telco has many of the right attributes. It has the local trusted relationship. It's typically locally regulated. It typically has a strong relationship with the local governments who are suddenly have all woken up to the fact that this is a massive dividend for their country. That's why you see so much attention to it, rightly or wrongly, in the election going on here. But all around the world, governments are very focused on the future of trade is digital, and every country wants to be in that digital trade flow. If you look at what's happening in countries like Singapore, tiny country, traditionally made a lot of money out of being in the physical trade flow, now trying to figure out how it's in the digital trade flow, and it's absolutely understanding that connectivity is pivotal to that. So I think the challenge for telcos is not a matter of if we need the connectivity or what role it will play, it's whether the companies who own and control it today can profitably turn that around for the next decade. And that's where I think we have to learn from some of the new entrants into the market. And there's a lot to be said about what Rakuten's doing. Some of it's very specific to Japan, but there's also a lot that you can take out in terms of taking a radical approach.
Sure. Thank you. So,
Where's your catch box, Graham? Is it?
I've got it in my hand.
Oh, you've got it?
Right here in my hand. So this is a microphone. We're going to throw it around the room. First of all, I'm going to give it to Ross. There you go. And you speak in the top, so put your hand up if you want to ask a question, make a point.
Well,
and yeah, over here we've got our...
Before you say that, I should make an apology for, I think it was 2 years ago, one of the motions was renationalisation of the telco is the only way to get ubiquitous fibre coverage. Obviously, the Labour Party has been reviewing the great telco debate in terms of what we all said. So it was defeated, by the way.
So, William, sorry.
William Webb, consultant. So I'm thinking back, we could have had exactly this debate 20 years ago in 1999. We would have just had to replace 5G by 3G, and we could have had exactly the same debate. And I remember the telco saying then, we have to move up the value chain, it's desperately bad otherwise. What's happened in the last 20 years? Location-based services, video telephony, picture messaging, e-health, e-wallets, walled gardens, widgets, football content, loads of things the telcos have tried, all failed. Now, they've been brilliant, as we said, at delivering better and better and better connectivity for less and less money. Superbly good at being bit pipes. Superbly bad at moving up the value chain. I see nothing that's changed that, and nothing convinced me in the statements. I said, well, we've just got to do this. There was no actual description of how it would be achieved. It was just, we've got to do this. If there really is an investment issue, then that's a market failure to be addressed by regulators. That's not a value chain type issue. But I'm not even convinced that there is. But I think the key question is, what has changed since 1999 that means you can now move up the value chain? What's so different compared to the last?
Mike, do you want to answer that?
Yeah. So first, there have been several use cases where I think that have looked promising, but several where the industry has missed. The most promising would be, let's start with content delivery networks, CDNs. So you have Akamai over here. Makes a ton of money, runs a great CDN, most things that are streamed were some form going through. Well, what did we do as telcos? We put in CDNs. We put them in every exchange. We made sure that you got brilliant streaming. We took kit from every over-the-top player and we put it in. And what did we do? We gave that away for free to manage traffic on our networks rather than actually creating services we could sell. Bad mistake. And it's because we had a mentality of thinking about how do we manage load and reduce load to reduce cost. I think in the next generation, we start looking at 5G and the services that we can provide, in particular edge compute. I think the industry, we understand because we've lived through the CDN. So when I talk around with, whether it's Deutsche Telekom, Orange, Singtel, AT&T, when I go around and talk, we all get it. There is not one telco that isn't saying edge is going to be important for these emerging low latency use cases. You can go through and say what those are, network edge. We believe that we are smarter at how we're going to package these services, these next-gen services that you cannot go around us to get. You're not going to get network edge from an OTT player. You have to definitionally come to us. We're not going to release those. The second thing that I think in particular is we're also we're at a unique point with the regulators. So when regulators around the globe lean on their telcos, what do they lean on? They're frustrated with the fact of data exploitation from over-the-top players that really don't care and operate in jurisdictions where they don't have to care about the local populations within these countries. So they make a mistake, wasn't that bad, we'll fix it, we'll turn it off. Well, the reality is the regulators and governments don't want that anymore. Well, who can they actually squeeze? They can squeeze the local telco. So the fact that we're right down the street, if Ofcom reaches out and says, we want to meet with your CEO, I can guarantee you same day our CEO is showing up at Ofcom. You reach out to name the OTT player that's sitting out in the west coast of the US, they're not coming on a plane over here. They're going to send some delegate of some delegate of some delegate, and the governments, they absolutely know this. And so they're going to actually start to say, well, how do we readjust the environment to where we can have some of the control systems we expect in place? And to be honest, telcos, because we've been regulated day one on carve-outs, we actually know how to work in a regulated environment quite well. The question is, how do you monetize that? And the answer for me is, right now, we know we can monetize it because we are in those dialogues, and how they will play out. I don't want to pick what the right winner is going to look like, because that's going to be who's in charge of government, who's in charge of policy. But the reality is the telco's dynamics on how we're interacting with regulators, and I'm talking this globally, not just BT, it's a different dialogue. It is a very different dialogue than it was a decade ago, which is telcos, how are you screwing customers over? I need you to lower your prices. It's now about how do I make a more favorable, friendly, investable criteria with something that can be regulated and controlled so that we don't have exploitation of information.
So can I just respond directly to something William said? You posed the question about what has changed in the last 20 years. I think something that's very different between now and 20 years ago is in what people want to invest in. 20 years ago, there was a great desire to invest in somewhat intangible .com businesses on the back of very little physical infrastructure, in the hope of something glittering at the end of that. Today, what people want to invest in is long-term infrastructure. There's a huge amount of funds ready to invest in that infrastructure, to get sensible, cautious, steady, but nevertheless attractive returns. And telcos are beautifully situated for that. They are creating the infrastructure. 120 years ago, Bazalgette invested or made sure that we built sewers around London, and we still get the benefit of that today. It's a bit like that today with infrastructure investment. There's the opportunity to invest funds in infrastructure like fibre and like sort of the sites and the plumbing for 5G, which will be with us for decades to come. And I think that's very good for both telcos and service providers.
I guess on the flip side of the motion is that yes, that's long term, but telcos, like many people, have been seduced by that short-term revenue that comes from the .com and from applications, and mobile took us into this because it became very personal as opposed to being a household connection or a business connection. So actually, it's also the finances of the telcos about, and I think it's to your point, it's the same, Mike, about being allowed to make a return on that investment. And I think that the trouble is by being seduced by all the sweets in the sweet shop, that are out there, rather than concentrating on running the shop.
But I think the recipe on the sweets are going to change as well. Mike's probably charging for data right now, but who knows, maybe in 5 years he's going to charge for latency as well.
Who else is out there, Graham?
Okay, right. Who
wants to
else have we
contribute?
got? Well, let's go with Martin over there first, and then we'll have the gentleman. After Martin, we'll have the gentleman in the middle there.
Martin Taylor, Metaswitch. Surely the essential problem here is that connectivity is by and large an undifferentiated commodity. I mean, I know there are some differences between offerings, but essentially they're really all the same from the point of view of the user. Whereas what the over-the-top guys are offering is highly differentiated. When you've got an undifferentiated commodity market, then prices are going to get driven down to the point where it's barely sustainable. And I think what Michael is really arguing for is essentially expropriating some of the value that's been created by the over-the-top guys and giving it to the infrastructure guys in order to help the investment case. But I have to say, I do rather agree with William that the history of telcos moving up the value chain has not been a happy one, and I don't see that anything's really changed here. But I do think there is a case for saying that the Googles and the Facebooks and the Amazons of this world ought to be kind of paying their way a little bit more than they are, somehow.
No, it's a great point. I just want to reiterate, when we look at the world and we think about the world, we're talking about future investment of what do people value, what do people want to pay for, and what do they need. Unfortunately, as an industry, we haven't been that good at explaining that connectivity isn't the same. And I'll use just a very simple thing. You've got an open reach wire that connects to a network. And we talk about that wire, and even some of our competitors talk about that wire, whether copper or fiber being the same. The reality is, and Howard, who's here, can talk about this, is majority of our investment, or a massive amount of our investment, goes into our core. And so last week we had a peak spike of 17 terabits per second for Fortnite and Amazon streaming sport. That
wasn't the Prince Andrew video that was cool.
The important thing about that, what does that mean? Our network outperformed all the other networks by far. And so majority of the people were hitting buffering, slow connections at home, unable to do simultaneous streaming. I mean, this is what happened in the marketplace in the UK just last week. But we don't actually explain that in a way that customers can understand, well, what do you get when you actually buy connectivity? Because if it were just a flowing commodity like water, I would agree 100%. But the reality is actually the exact opposite. Massive amounts of people underinvest and then try and pitch it to the public as the same thing. And then when they do that, people then switch. We hear them switch to name one of our competitors who underinvests. And they come back and they tell us, well, wow, that didn't work. It was actually a terrible experience. This is just the way the marketplace, so people can discover it, but we are not communicating it, and therefore we're not able to price it appropriately in the market. And so you end up with what I consider just industry bad practices like unlimited, untethered mobile pricing. I mean, that's just, it cannot, that cannot play out for the long haul with the current usage patterns, because no one can make money. And at some point, no one can invest.
I think we need to separate, sorry Graham, I think we need to separate two things there. If you are selling generic connectivity, it is by definition ultimately a commoditized product. I agree with you, there are variations, but if we're honest, to your point about explanation, I can't remember the last time I went to somebody's house and they said, well, my broadband's so much better than yours because I'm with provider X. Yeah. And for a company like BT, that may not even be visible to the customer because they just pay their bill to somebody. They don't know it's the BT network or somebody else's network behind that. So a lot of that's invisible to customers. Similarly to enterprises, it's very difficult to actually say, well, I tried you both and your one was better. So I think it is ultimately a commoditized product. But that is just looking at one side of it. That's still selling the same old pipe of some sort, whether you think it's smart or dumb. The opportunity, I think, to answer a lot of the economic challenges is when we get into packaging that connectivity into solutions. And that's where, when we look at what's happening to all of our enterprise customers and will happen over the next decade, these industries are also on a massive transformation journey. And they will pay based on the value and efficiency they get back. So can they get the right balance between what the cost of that technology solution is and what they're having to lay out for that, and what the benefit they're getting back. And that's where, if we turn up and say, well, we can give you SIM cards or pipes, we're not adding value. We're just a commodity. If we're saying, we are partnered with the right technology players to transform the efficiency of a factory by 20% or transform the experience for the customer in the car, then we're getting into a solution. And I think that's where you get out of the non-differentiated product.
So guys, we've
we'll
got about
remain
5 minutes left of this session. I want to just bring in a few more people from the audience. So we have this gentleman down here who's got the microphone. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, Steve Unger, independent. I used to be a regulator. The question is set up as, do telcos create value? And I think everyone's going to agree they do. We're all going to vote green, I suspect. The real debate is about who captures the value. I find this debate slightly distasteful because the truth is the platforms have done a great job in creating additional value over the connectivity provided by telcos. I do think the two parts of industry are complementary, and I also think the track record of both players in getting into the other side, if you like, has been fairly poor. The OTTs have tried a few times to get into connectivity, not always been successful. I don't think they've ever been successful. The other way around is true, I think, with telcos. So don't we just need to get used to the idea that we've got two different types of company, they're very different types of company, and we all benefit from that complementarity.
Never the same, sure, mate. Thank you, Steve. Right, we'll take another comment from the floor over there, gentleman over there, and then we'll have Dean. Then we'll have Dean, because Dean always makes a lovely contribution.
Okay, Dean.
Winds everybody up. But
is it John first? Okay, Dean Bubley. I think we've just heard the dinosaurs arguing for greater regulation on asteroids.
Is that a new one, or have you had that for a while?
well done, well done. That
was on Twitter about 5 minutes ago.
Fair enough.
If things like fibre and 5G allow network slicing for innovative service companies to guarantee quality and performance, there's nothing stopping the telcos, including BT, from inventing cool services and then buying a slice on AT&T's network or KDDI's or China Mobile's and doing exactly what you're trying to sell to Google. And I think part of the problem here is that telcos want to be a platform seller but not a platform buyer. And I think that is a fundamental flaw in the proposition here.
thank you, Dean. Gentlemen on that table. Oh my goodness, he's dropped it.
Are we insured, by the way?
You won't make the rugby team. Anyway, carry on.
Have I broken your mic? No, I'm broken. John Delaney, IDC. Chris and I, Chris may remember or may not, because it was quite a long time ago. About 8-9 years ago, we were at a next-gen telco conference in Budapest, which gathered together CTOs from quite a lot of the biggest telcos. And there was a closed-room session where we were discussing exactly this question. I think the question was, do telcos become value-added service providers, or do they become bit pipes? Just reviewed my notes from that. So that was the terms in which we were discussing that then. And I think just as now, there was a confusion between what you aspire to and what really is happening. Clearly, it's desirable for telcos to move in the direction of greater value, and Michael indeed argued it's an imperative, but just because something seems imperative doesn't mean it's going to happen. Hasn't happened in the last decade since that conference in Budapest. And there was one honourable exception in that session, and it was Deutsche Telekom. The Deutsche Telekom CTO said, we are a pipe, and we must strive to be the best pipe. And I wonder whether, instead of focusing on becoming different kinds of companies, telcos ought to focus more on being the best at the companies they already are.
Be your best self.
That's a fine summary, I think. Should we get Mr. Parsons up?
Right, I think Ross, where is he?
And while Ross is making his way to the stage, in previous debates we've had contributions from economists and bankers and all sorts of strange people. I did have a discussion with the chief economist of EY just before the debate. He couldn't make it this year. But he was, looking at what we've just discussed, at one extreme of it, and it was partly a political conversation, the notion of that, surely the benefits to society, which we get heard about quite a lot now, should be bringing together many more of the different utilities and actually getting economy of scale along those lines. So I think that, but thank you, a fantastic contribution. Ross, you may introduce the fantastic analogue voting system.
Thank you. Excellent. That's a great short debate. Excellent contributions from the witnesses. Preeti, I think you thoroughly confused Graham Wilde when you mentioned the importance of taking a full wallet with you before embarking on a night out. Concept I'm not entirely familiar with. So it's now very excitingly time to introduce the interactive, high-technology 5G voting system. Now, the irony of using the manual voting system that we have here at such a technological future of telecoms debate is not lost on us. But we love a bit of audience interaction. Oh, yes, we do. Oh, great. It's not quite Panther season. Okay, so those in favor of the motion, when I say vote now, please put your panel with the green bit forward and those against with the red bit forward. So, can you vote now? Oh, I'm calling that's an overwhelming victory for the motion. The motion is carried.
Sorry, Dean.